everybody, welcome to Abletunes. My name is Guido. I am from Cat and Beats and also from mixmasteru.com. And Abletunes have asked me to go over every single plugin within the Ableton Live 9 suite. That's a huge list of plugins because we're going to be covering all the audio effects, all the MIDI effects, and all the instruments in depth. So you get to learn all these things in depth. Every hidden little feature, we're also going to be talking about that. And if you're interested in this kind of stuff, make sure to subscribe to this channel. Click on the little notification bell so that you get all the new updates right there and then to stay updated. And we're doing this for you, so if you could do something for us and just give us a like, it would really help us out. And if you have any questions or comments or suggestions, then put them in the comment section below. We'll have a read through it and, we'll make sure that you really understand everything that we're trying to do here. Now, today, we're going to be talking about EQ8, and EQ8 stands for equalizer, EQ, equalizer, and then 8 stands for 8 filters, which you can change around. So then you have a fully parametric EQ with 8 filters. EQ8. All right, so now we know kind of what it is. An equalizer, by the way, is literally just a volume knob on specific frequencies. All right, that's the only thing it is. And the fully parametric part is that you can change the frequencies, the gain, and the Q. I'll get to that in a second, but just so that you know that. To open up EQ8, the only thing you need to do is either, if you're a mousy type of guy or girl, click on Audio Effects, click on EQ8, move it to anywhere you want, and drop it. So you hold your left mouse button down and you just drop it. So on the reverb, on the master, on in the middle of nowhere, on a group, whatever you want. So let's just drop it in the middle of nowhere and boop, you open up a audio channel. The next part, if you want to open up and you're more of a keyboard type of guy or girl like me, I like just using Control F or Command F and then writing the word EQ, and then there it is. Buff. Okay, so it's a little bit faster than doing everything with your mouse, but to each their own. I always find it, I say this because I find it weird that people click around all the time. I just use your keyboard, but that's me. Let's see, EQ8, let's get started with it. So let's get an example. I'm going to use a drum loop from Abletunes' Modern, Deep, and Future House. And I'm going to turn that down just a tad, not to have it that loud, so that it doesn't blast through your speakers. Let's have a listen to it. Nice. So it's nice and clean, it's nice and wide, so we can go over all types of EQing. Now, I'm going to turn everything off, and then we're going to turn everything on again together, going through everything and explaining what's going on. So the only button I didn't turn off is this one. And that button is the output spectrum, which basically, if I press play on this loop, you can see these waveform being played back. I can turn it off. And the only reason why this is handy is sometimes when you're mixing or you're mastering or you're trying to find maybe keys of a melody that's being played, you can use this spectrum analyzer to see what you're doing as well. Not only to hear what you're doing, but to see it. I almost always recommend turning this off. So you first do everything via your ear, because at the end of the day, you're trying to make music or do post audio work or something like that. And then turning it on only when you want to be 100% sure what you're doing is right. All right, so just so you know that, I'm going to leave that on. The second button that I'm going to press is this one. If I press this little triangle, it will actually expand, so we have a bigger view of this spectrum. And what do we have on this spectrum? Well, at the bottom, we have 100, 1K, and 10K. That is basically the frequency spectrum. The left being the low frequencies, the sub-frequencies, and the right going all the way up to 22 kilohertz being the high frequencies. Now, some fun parts about this. This area is going to be your sub-frequencies. This area is going to be your low mids, and I'm kind of going like this because it's around here, your low mids. This area is going to be your high mids, And then here we're gonna have your highs, okay? Or maybe somewhere over here, you're gonna be your highs. High mids, low mids, sub. All right? So just that you know that right off the bat. And I'm gonna give you the examples for where do you normally cut frequencies, where do you normally boost frequencies. So stay tuned for that as well, coming in a little bit. Now, let's get started. We have here at the bottom, so normally you're going to be using it like this. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. These are the filters that we can change. Let's turn on a filter. I'm just going to open it up again. Turn on a filter right over here. We're going to turn on number 3. And you do that with these toggles. Boop. You just toggle switch it and it turns on. And as you can see, my number 3 is right on 1K. Your number 3 might be somewhere else because I saved a new default preset, but regardless, it doesn't really matter. Putting it over there to begin with. Now, you can either move this number 3 with your mouse, or you can move it with this knob, and these knobs you can MIDI map to any controller. So if you have a knobby controller type of thing at home or in your studio, you can right click and edit MIDI map, and then you can touch your knob and then you can start moving things with knobs. It is nicer, again, I like using my fingers more than continuously with my mouse, so it's up to you. You can do this too. I'm going to turn that back off. Let's now continue with just listening and seeing what we're doing here. So the first filter that comes up, and as you saw, I opened this pop-up menu now via this little triangle, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different types of filters. The first filter with the ×4, it says ×4 very small. I don't know if you can see that, but it says ×4. And what this filter is a low cut filter, because you're cutting away the low, or it's also referred to as a high pass filter, because you're passing the highs. The you shall not pass is only required for the low frequencies. They shall not pass. But everybody else is fine to join into the song. And this, if you want to get your nerd on, is a 48 dB low cut filter. The times that you use a 48 dB per octave low cut filter, or just a sharper cutoff curve, is when you need to cut off low frequencies here, and you need to make sure that it's relatively fast, this cutoff. So I mean, not fast, it's very steep. So for instance, if you have let's say you have a kick drum and you don't need the kick drum to go all the way down here, because there's a bass line playing all the way down there. So what you can do, you can then cut the low end a little bit, because most people and most systems don't play lower than 20 hertz to begin with. So I always suggest you just have this low cut on at around 30 hertz, because at the end of the day, all this low information, you can't really hear it, and most systems can't play it back, so why would you have that low information there to begin with? Okay, your compressor will thank you. Anyway, let's just turn this on. So basically you can cut around 44 hertz off of this. Also visually you can see it's in the spectrum that it doesn't make a difference. Now, another cool thing you can do with low cut filters is to make that sweeping sound, right? You know what I mean? So before a drop happens, I'm just going to take this, go over to the dark side, the arrangement side, drop it in there, poof, duplicate it, tuck, tuck, and let's make a drop. Another thing you can do is use the EQ8 to make filter sweeps. And the reason I'm saying use EQ8 is because when I work for Mixmaster U and I'm mixing your project while recording the whole thing, I noticed that, you like that little plug? I noticed that a lot of people use autofilter. And the problem with autofilter is that once you turn it on, you already have a relatively steep cutoff. So you immediately notice it happening. So what I suggest you do is you use EQ8 and automate that instead. So just if you want to do that, a little bit of automation, you can see that when I move this frequency knob, there's another red line, there's the automation line moving. So what you can do to make a drop, I'm just going to zoom in a little bit, is to just create 2 little points, and there we go, and there we go, and zoom in and get that just right. There you go. You can use EQ8 and then you get this type of and party time. Okay, obviously you can do that the same way the other way around. Anyway, let's go back over to this side. So it's not only a tutorial about the functions of knobs, but it's also a tutorial about what you do with those knobs. That's the cutoff filter. That is steep. All right, then we have another cutoff filter, and this one is not that steep. This one is called a 12 dB per octave cutoff filter. In other words, not that steep of a cutoff filter. I tend to use this type of cutoff filter when I don't need to surgically remove a low frequency somewhere. Or low frequency, any frequency where I need to cut off the lower end of it. And this is kind of the more, the less steep your cutoff filters are, the more musical your EQing will be. So if you do very surgical EQing, meaning very precise little cuts and thing, is called surgical, and it's not regarded as musical with, mixing engineers. And the more soft and smooth everything is, the more people regard to it as a musical EQ. All right, so the Pultec EQ, for instance, you can Google it if you want, but is considered a musical EQ, and the SSL EQ is, for instance, more of a surgical EQ, but you can use it both ways. So it's maybe a versatile EQ. Now, anyway, this is a low thing, I guess. I tend to use this more for harmonics. So when I have harmonics, that means anything that is played with nice chords or vocals or leads, anything that isn't drums pretty much. I tend to try to use this one the most because then it won't sound too artificial. So the sound of the song will stay the same. All right. Still nothing too interesting happening yet, but let's get to the in-string part. Oh yeah, we have this one now. This is called a low shelf filter. And as you can see, it boosts a whole bunch of information. You can either low cut something or low boost something. And this is nice to use, especially over at the 1K area. And the reason why I'm saying the 1K area, which is probably a little bit, counterproductive to most people, is that, again, when I get a mix in, or when I get somebody's master file in, it always seems to be that if you have the EQ curve like this, yeah, it always seems that the whole song is just lifted either with way too much bass or way too much treble. It's either or, and that always depends on the room, and you can't hear it because of the room acoustics, blah, blah, blah. But if you look at your mix, what you can do is a cheap trick here. If you get a little bit of pink noise, and you'll notice that a pink noise will have this very soft cutoff filter, and pink noise is a type of noise that is around us all the time. It's your heart makes pink noise, the waves make pink noise, whatever. But you can kind of shape your EQ so that it is relatively balanced. Okay, this is more of a mastering type of deal, but you can then shape it so it doesn't go boom, boom, boom with really heavy basses or with really heavy hi-hats in there. Normally I would say fix it in the mix, but if you've already bounced it down, then you can use a low shelf EQ to make either a little bit more bass or a little bit less of that bass thing happen, because it might be just a bit too much. And as you can see, my Q knob has now lit up as well, and I can do something even more cool. Check this out. So another cool thing to do with this type of EQing, this low shelf EQing, is you can see that when I put the Q up, the Q being the steepness, I can create a tiny little dip before I create a bump, right? Now, this is a very nice and easy trick to use when you want your kick drum to be less muddy, when you want your mix to just sit a little bit nicer, okay? And the reason why this is cool is because I think that in the 1950s, the Pultec EQ came out, and this is exactly what it did. It just did a tiny little bump. Wait, let me just cut it out. It looked a little bit like that, and it just did a tiny little bump, and you could then choose the frequency that you did that bump for, and then before you did that bump, this is the bump I'm talking about, it would have a little cut. And then you get all these smooth, hi-fi type of sounds. So I'll just show you this as well so that you understand. So we'll do a EQ before and after. So this is before. And we'll turn it on. I don't really know what I'm doing right now because I can't hear it. So you can really thicken out the bottom end via not adding too many frequencies. So basically, you're taking away a little bit and you're adding a little bit, and then you make cool little bumps without making the volume change too big because you're taking away as well. Now, personally, I wouldn't use the low shelf to do this trick. I would instead use 2 filters and use the bell curve and use another bell curve because you can turn on as 8 of them. And if we want to make the Q a little bit wider, you can also do that with holding Alt, zoop, like that. You can create a custom little bell curve. And there you go. Because then you can make it custom to the track. So let's check that out as well. Much better. So having a tiny little cut and a tiny little boost, tiny, this being 2 and this being -7, gives you a smooth type of sound. Again, try to do this for any sound. Try to have a little cut and a boost just to see how it sounds to you. Because most likely you'll be surprised with how much better and more musical your EQing will become. All right. So that's that. Let's move on to the next type of next type of curve, and that is this notch filter. So let's open this up. There will be times in your life where you find frequencies that you hate. And those frequencies tend to be, so that you already know this, between 1K and around 8K. And also up here. And the reason they tend to be over there more so than over here is because your hearing, our hearing actually as humans, they're sensitive between the 1K to around 8K area. You can Google the word Fletcher-Munson curve, for instance, if you want to know about this kind of stuff. But we're sensitive in this area. So when something is too piercing or too annoying, you will grab an EQ, preferably parametric, to take out filters. Now, there's nothing really too annoying about this loop, but we can find some annoying frequencies, to cut out if you like. So what you can do is you take a bell curve, and then after that we'll go to this one, because there's a sneaky trick for that. I'm gonna open up the queue a little bit just to have a little bit more information. Okay, so let's just say that we find a annoying, the tail of the what is this? The clap. What you can do is you can cut it out. So we completely cut that out now. And if you say to yourself, normally you would have a cue that's very narrow, so surgical, so you'd have something like this. But if you say like, okay, so we have it to minus 15 dB now, and the reason I say minus 15 dB is I can see it over here at the bottom that there's minus 15, and I have the note values here and then the frequencies there. Okay, so I have minus 15 dB here, and I'm thinking, minus 15, I hate that sound so much, this one little frequency. Now I'm going to use another type of curve, and that's this one, the notch filter. And this notch literally cuts it to oblivion, literally deletes this sound because I find it so annoying. So when you have frequencies that are, it's called resonant frequencies, normally you find them all over the place, and you really cannot deal with those resonant frequencies, use a notch filter to just delete it. Okay, you just delete that filter. So that's where you use notch filters in general. Another place to use notch filters is also for sound design. What you can do is you can start automating notch filters. So having several notch filters, all like going, and then you can do, add LFOs to that. So you have low frequency oscillators that move around, and you can start creating absolutely sick basses. If you're into that kind of stuff, you can also move another frequency like that, and put the Q up, and have this basically automate like that. Then you'll get very, very, very fat sounds. Basically, that is going into synthesis a little bit, but remember, EQ8 is extremely versatile. You can do what you like to do. Next filter that's up is the high shelf filter. There you go. Again, same principle as the low shelf filter. If it's lopsided, you can use the high shelf filter to just give a little bit of extra shine. So I tend to use this a lot in mid-side mode, but we're going to get to that in a bit. And I think most people use this in mid-side mode to begin with. Or when the mix is just lopsided and it doesn't have enough shine to it, you can use a little bit of this. Make sure your filters don't look like that, though. That you, like, there's not enough highs and you give it like 15 dB gain in the high part. Just go back into your mix and fix it there. It's more for, add about 2 dB, 3 dB, and see how you feel about that. Not too much, okay? Take it easy, unless you're doing sound design. Next up is the low pass filter / the high cut filter. High is being cut, low is being passed. So the pass are being low. So here, again, you can do that automation thing if you want to go. You can also automate the low and the high end together, that it has a sweep of only one band going through. See, like that. It's up to you. Yeah, you can automate that. You can also record it in via knobs, via this button here. Then you can record it if you press on the record button. So that's that. And I use this because a lot of people tend to send mixes through that are just, they have a lot of highs, like freakish high, like all of a sudden they have a peak right there. So cutting that off makes your mix sound warmer. If you're interested in this kind of stuff, look up mastering for vinyl, and you'll notice that, when people say vinyl sounds so much warmer, vinyl sound has this harmonic beauty to it, blah, blah, blah. It's basically one of the big factors of it is that vinyl cannot reproduce high frequencies. So those super high, harsh frequencies aren't going to be played back because there's a cutoff filter, because vinyl can't actually be cut with those high filters in it. So just so you know, that's why vinyl is one of the reasons why vinyl sounds so chilled out. So yeah, cut off your high frequencies if you want a warmer type of mix. Around like from 12K, I already start cutting it ish. Okay. Then we have the high cut steep filter. Use this when you have really weird peaky sounds. I had a mix the other day where there was a kick drum and it has a peak literally here. It was insane. Use this to just get rid of that. Another thing to note, though, is that when you're doing high cuts and you're making the filter types really tight, make sure you click on the right here on the top and click on oversampling. And what oversampling does is that it stops the Nyquist frequency from happening. Now, I'm not a mathematician, but in short, what happens is with oversampling on, is that, one second, what was it again? Okay, good. So if your session is 44.1 kilohertz, it gets sampled twice via EQ8, so you get 88 kilohertz, and then it spits back out 44 kilohertz. So it gets upsampled once and then downsampled again. And I think what that does, well, actually, what it does is then give you a, what is it again? It gives you less distortion in the high end. But this is really, you know, basically the take home message is only use this if you have like a really piercy mix and something's not right, something's not feeling right. Make sure your EQ8s are on oversampling. If you have cutoff filters in that area or you're doing weird stuff there, put it on oversampling and you should be okay then. And if you're interested in this kind of stuff, I can make another video on it explaining exactly what the Nyquist theory is and the oversampling, but I just don't remember it right now. Anyway, that's that. We've done the filter types and we've done the Nyquist frequency. Let's check out this button as well, because this button is brilliant. So I press this button, and what that does is actually it's solo. So remember the blue is for solo. It's also here, solo. So it's a cool little trick there. What it does is we can solo a frequency. So let's say that we don't want to have that doo 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 sound. You can just cut it out. And it's really handy to have the solo frequency there because when you're trying to search for something with it off, sometimes it can be a little bit distracting. You're just like, I don't know exactly which sound it is that I'm trying to. I know it's up in this frequency area somewhere, but I just don't know which one it is. So solo it. It'll be a lot easier. It's like as soon as your ears hurt or as soon as the sound resonates, and resonating sounds you find via if this, you know, you have a clap and you have the clap mains frequency, but in that clap you have a sound that just goes on longer than the clap hit itself, then you have a resonant frequency. Stand in your bathroom, for instance, and hum. You'll have at one point a frequency where all the walls will shake like that. That's the resonant frequency, okay? You'll hear it. You kind of have to train your ears for that, but I'm sure you know what I'm talking about when you stand in that bathroom. All right, so that's that solo mode. Then we have the adaptive EQ, or adaptive Q, excuse me. And the adaptive Q is from SSL, if I'm not mistaken. And what it does is the further I go up, the more narrow it becomes. So it's really handy to have. Normally, I always have the adaptive Q on because when I'm looking for something, I'm just like, okay, boop, where is it? Okay, it's right there, tough. And I don't have to first change the Q with the Alt button because that's kind of annoying. You know what I mean? All right, so adaptive EQ, always leave it on because it's easy to work with unless you don't need it. Now, we're going to go up over let's go over the skill button and let's get in some more music so I can show you that skill button. So we're going to go into Abletunes. Let's take out some bass line. Here we go. And let's take out some, what should we take? Actually, wait. Yeah, actually, we'll have the bass line and then we'll have a synth loop. Whatever. All right. So I'm going to turn both of these down for now. And I don't know how loud they are yet. So let's just turn everything on. Wow, that didn't work. What is this? Oh, I took a bass drum. Excuse me. Bass loops. Is there not something else that I can use? 1 second. Let me have a look for a second. Oh man, this is annoying, isn't it? Oh, chord melody. Yeah, okay, so let's use the... Okay, let's use that instead. Let's use this melody and... Okay, fine. So let's use that instead. Turn this down. And let's have a playthrough. So it sounds nice and fresh, right? It's nice and future house / modern deep. Now, check this out. If we take that EQ again, so Command F, EQ8, and put it on there. And then I'm going to take another one. Instead of opening it up again, I'll just copy paste it. Actually, in a second. For instance, if we're listening to this track right now. What we always need to remember is that the lead or the vocal always goes first. Okay, so what we can do is we can take EQ8. I'm just going to drag and drop it onto the lead here. I can rename things via Command R, and here we can rename things again, chords. There you go. So we have the lead here, because the lead is, or the vocals are always the thing that people sing back. All right, so just try to always think of like that. What we can do is, you know, you have Isotope Neutron, right? And they have a masking feature on it, and it's all super advanced, this and that and the other. But Ableton can do the same. So check this out. So if we just take this sound for a second, and we curve out the what is it called? We curve out the notes. And we basically notice that in this area, we need it to be boosted a little bit. For instance, I'm not saying we need it to be boosted, but... Okay, so we basically have information here that we want lifted, generally speaking. But if we now cut this one, paste it back onto the chords, and say, go to the scale button, and invert that scale down, you can actually cut out the frequencies you need to be cut out so that you can hear the lead better. You see? So you can use the other elements in your track that you want in the front as a sort of canvas to paint your EQs, and you can then drop those on the other harmonics that you don't need so much in the future, that are just adding things on. And then you copy paste that thing back, and you can cut and make a really nice mix with this super simple trick. You just cut frequencies you don't need. Normally this takes engineers quite a long time to do, but we have a skill button, so poof. Nice, right? So I found that skill button absolutely genius. Then we also have stereo mode. So we have the stereo mode area. Let's go over there, and I'm going to turn this down for a second, and we're going to go here into Dust the Drums. Because we have stereo mode, left to right mode, and mid-side mode. Left-right mode, I mean, it speaks for itself. The only time I use left-right mode is when I am doing post-production work and somebody used a stereo microphone and it didn't go perfect. So you can start cutting out frequencies then. For instance, the left microphone picked up a lot of wind here, and it's super, super loud, and the right has a perfect amount of texture to it. I'll do little inverts and copy pastes and things like that. But left-right mode speaks for itself. You can EQ the left and the right separately. Mid-side mode is something that you and I will most likely use way more than left-right mode. So if you go mid-side mode, the mid becomes orange and the side becomes yellow. And what you can do with mid-side mode is, for instance, if we have this this thing here, and we notice that there's one sound there that is extremely wide, which is that weird clap sound. But now imagine that you actually have another percussion track which already has everything on the side, and you just don't need it there. What you can do is you can cut that weird clap sound out and just cut it out, because you have another thing in the side already. Ready? So then your drums will become more mono compatible, because you're only leaving that side information up here. And again, look at the spectrum. remember, if I put this on, you can actually see what you're cutting and what you're making new again. So that's really a nice thing to have. Also, if you're into the more mastering mode, there's, tends to be people that make really wide basses, but you don't need your sub bass to be wide. Okay, there's a long story behind it, but just remember that you don't need your sub bass to be wide like that if you want a powerful mix. So what you can do is you can cut the low ends side and then boost a little bit. I don't know if I remember saying this, boost the highs a little bit on that on the side information. It will make it sound more opened up. Your mix and master will open up a little bit. It's a nice thing to do. If you in your mid, for instance, you can do the exact opposite of what you're doing in your side, but you have some fun with the mid side, but make sure that your mixes aren't too wide, specifically in the low end. You don't need it. So that's why, and when you use mid side mode. Now, the last thing is over here: analyze, block, refresh, and average. Basically, the blocks represent, the more blocks you have, the more detailed your vision, your view will be. Okay, so this analyze view here. So the more details we put in it, like 16,384 is the amount of FFT blocks which will be shown. I have no clue what that means. The refresh rate is how fast it refreshes. I always suggest that you keep the refresh rate relatively low so you can see the peaks and things over time. It's quite nice to have a slow spectrum and not a fast one, personally speaking. And the average is the number of averages. Okay, I'm going to read this because I don't actually know this. Number of FFT blocks average for each display update. Lower values update the display more often and are useful for measuring peaks. Higher values result in slower rate of changes and are useful for measuring the averages over time. Well, there you go. So you can put it up if you want it slower. You put it down if you want it faster. And then the last one is the gain knob. This is the slider booster, attenuates EQ's overall output by up to 12 dB. So you can actually, so you know how you have like 15 dB plus, right? If you put an extra 12 dB on that, then you have, well, you're probably better at math, but then you have 27 dB of extra, and or put it down. So if you, for instance, have a really heavy EQ and you're like, ooh, it's a bit too much, you just turn it down a little bit, see how it sounds then, okay? Because then you make your minus 15 minus 3 dB change. All right, that's it. I hope you've enjoyed it. I know there was a lot of information to cover. I'm going to be doing a mixing and mastering course for Abletunes as well, and then I will actually explain everything with proper examples, and I'll be using EQ8 like nobody's business. So now you know all the ins and outs. I just want to show you one more thing. Make sure, I always end the video like this, you can Command G this, you can Command Group this, you can change macro control, so you can go like this, map to macro number 1, you can map this to macro number 1, for instance, and you can go do all these crazy type of automations. Remember, these knobs you can automate, okay? You can also automatically automate them via using Max for Live's LFO or any other Max for Live device as well. That's going to be it for today. Again, my name was Guido. I am from Cat and Beats and from Mixmaster, and I want to thank Abletunes for this opportunity. So, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Leave a like, comments in the description, subscribe to the channel, notification bell for all the updates. Take care, much love, and peace out. Hey guys, just one more thing. I completely forgot to show you how to save a default preset. Basically, I like having my preset like this, with only 3 filters on, and that's because I'll pretty much always take out resonance, take out bass, and take out tops, and if I need more, then I'll turn them on. So to do this, what you can do is you right click, and then you go to save as default preset, and then you just click yes. Boom. And then you've changed your EQ8 to always open up, super relaxed, and you don't have to continuously turn things on and off, because every single time you leave one of these on, a little bit more of CPU is used. So tread carefully here, only turn things on that you are using, turn everything else off, because it only adds to CPU usage. Peace.